In the opening scene, an advocate takes his client to a person's house named Palipadan. Palipadan has a migraine and cannot tolerate loud noises, so they park the car a little ahead and walk towards the house. When the client attempts to ring the doorbell, the advocate stops him. Seeing the servant lady of Palipadan working outside, the advocate asks if the owner is home. The servant lady goes inside to inform Palipadan. After a short while, Palipadan's wife opens the door, and the advocate informs her that they have come regarding a case. Palipadan is seen reading a science book inside, with a book on criminal laws also on the table. When his wife informs him that someone has come to see him, Palipadan gets up and approaches. The advocate tells him that he has come seeking advice to prevent his client from getting punished in a case. The case involves the client hitting his wife with an iron rod, resulting in her death, due to the client's weakness for women. As Palipadan examines the case file and post-mortem report, the client's phone keeps buzzing with message notifications, which irritates Palipadan. The advocate asks the client to stay calm. When the servant lady brings coffee and accidentally drops the tray, Palipadan gets angry and scolds her, causing the client to realize how terrifying Palipadan can be. Palipadan explains the loopholes in the case using IPC sections, giving the advocate confidence that his client will not get punished if these points are argued in court. After paying Palipadan, the client and advocate leave. The client remarks on how great it would be if such a genius argued in court, but the advocate reveals that Palipadan is just a clerk and not an actual lawyer. Palipadan had worked as a clerk for a leading criminal lawyer named Thomas but hasn't gone to work for the past 4 to 5 months for reasons unknown. The next night, while Palipadan is sleeping, he gets disturbed by the neighbor's dog barking. He wakes up, drinks, and angrily goes outside. In the morning, the neighbor is seen searching for his dog, Jimmy, calling out for him. When the servant lady asks what happened, the neighbor explains that the dog has been missing since last night. The servant lady assures him that the dog will return on its own. Meanwhile, she sees Palipadan in the backyard, using a shovel to cover a pit, and suspects that he might have killed the dog in his rage. In the next scene, Palipadan gets tense upon seeing a relative named Peter on the road. Peter is related to Palipadan's wife and seems to have taken a loan from her without repaying it. Palipadan warns him to return the money respectfully, or he will not even acknowledge their relationship. Palipadan's wife finds out about this and argues with him, asking why he treated Peter that way. Palipadan, getting stressed, tells her not to shout. But when his wife continues yelling, Palipadan hits her and grabs her by the neck, threatening to cut her into pieces if she argues any further. The servant lady witnesses this fight but is unable to intervene. The next morning, when the servant lady arrives, the wife is not at home, and all the doors and windows are locked. The servant lady is afraid to ring the doorbell at the front entrance and calls the wife, but the phone keeps ringing without an answer. Despite her fear, she knocks on the door, and Palipadan answers with a dirty shirt. When the servant lady asks where the wife is, Palipadan replies that she is not at home and tells her to come back the next day. Seeing the disorganized state of the house, the servant lady becomes frightened. She calls the wife's number again, and the phone rings inside the house. The servant lady notices bloodstains on Palipadan's shirt near his shoulder and, suspecting he might have killed his wife, leaves quickly. On her way, she informs a local villager about the incident, who goes to confirm it. Peeking through the window of Palipadan's house, the villager sees broken furniture and an alcohol bottle, with Palipadan holding an axe. Terrified, the villager returns to the servant lady, who suggests reporting this to the authorities. The news spreads throughout the area. The villager informs the local councillor, who contacts a constable, and the constable brings an ASI to meet the councillor. On hearing Palipadan's name, the ASI's facial expression changes. Meanwhile, Palipadan is seen cleaning up the broken items and mopping the bloodstains from the floor. In the next scene, the constable and Aussie go to Palipadan's house. It appears that the Aussie already knows Palipadan. To irritate Palipadan, the Aussie repeatedly presses the doorbell. When Palipadan opens the door, the Aussie casually engages in conversation. The constable informs them of a complaint regarding Palipadan's missing wife. Palipadan responds that his wife has gone to Madurai. The Aussie and constable, seeing the cracked TV, guess that some argument might have occurred last night. The Aussie asks what Palipodin did to his wife, to which Palipodin retorts with legal points. As the Aussie is not in uniform and without any written complaint or inspector, Palipodin tells them to leave without asking further questions. Although the house appears neat, there is a bloodstain on Palipodin's shirt, which he seems unaware of. Noticing it, the constable questions the origin of the bloodstain, and Palipodin claims it is chicken blood. Realizing Palipodin will not cooperate further, the Aussie and constable leave. In the following scene, the Aussie and constable meet with the inspector and inform him of the situation. The Aussie is convinced that Palipodin killed his wife and is putting on a drama. The inspector, who has also heard about Palipodin, is unsure to what extent this is true. Despite there being no direct evidence of a crime at Palipodin's house, Palipodin is considered valuable to a leading criminal lawyer. With an impending transfer, the inspector hesitates to involve himself in this issue. The Aussie insists, and the inspector reluctantly agrees. Meanwhile, Palipodin burns his blood-stained shirt and wears a similar one, smearing it with chicken blood again. In the next scene, the inspector, SI, constable, and their entire team arrive at Palipodin's house. The presence of so many police officers attracts the attention of the locals, who speculate that Palipodin, being a violent man, must have done something wrong. The police begin searching the house, and the inspector questions Palipodin. When Palipodin claims his wife left her phone at home and went to Madurai, the police find it hard to verify. The inspector notices the blood-stained shirt and, upon smelling it, recognizes it as chicken blood. The Aussie correctly guesses that Palipodin might have swapped the blood. Despite searching the house, they find no evidence, and the media arrives on the scene. Fearing backlash for leaving empty-handed, the inspector gets tense and reconfirms the situation with the ASI. Realizing that Palipodin is misleading them, the Aussie pushes him to the ground in front of the house, with the locals watching. In the crowd, the servant lady also stands by. At that moment, an auto arrives, and in a twist, Palipodin's wife gets out of the auto. Seeing the gathering, she rushes towards the house, and everyone, including the police, is shocked. Palipodin confidently twirls his mustache, leaving the servant lady speechless. The inspector, looking puzzled, glances at the SI. Palipodin's wife explains that she genuinely went to Madurai to meet a friend. The inspector, concluding there was some misunderstanding by the servant lady, leaves. The media questions the police, who state they came only for clarification. A neighbor, noting the lack of evidence, asks the Aussie to apologize publicly for suspecting and insulting an innocent man. The inspector agrees, and as the Aussie approaches Palipodin to apologize, Palipodin sarcastically tells everyone to disperse, and they all leave. In the next scene, the news spreads that Kerala police were humiliated, and social media is flooded with memes making fun of the Aussie with his photo. The entire department is upset by this. The DSP scolds the inspector for going against Palipodin without permission and cancels the transfer the inspector was supposed to get. The ASI's connection to Palipodin is revealed. 2 years ago, the ASI's brother-in-law was trapped in a case where the opponent was criminal lawyer Thomas. The Aussie approached Palipodin, who was Thomas's clerk at that time, to compromise the case, but Palipodin refused to be convinced. The inspector suspects that the Aussie might be taking revenge for that incident but believes the Aussie didn't do anything out of vengeance. The inspector strongly believes someone was killed in Palipodin's house. Meanwhile, Palipodin goes to another room, moves a cupboard aside, opens a secret door, and enters. He emerges a while later with bloodstains on his hand. It's unclear who is inside the secret room and what happened. In the next scene, the Aussie comes up with an idea. To find out the true victim killed by Palipodin, he decides to compile a list of people who had problems with Palipodin. The victim must be someone from that list. To identify the victim, the Aussie and constable visit the house of criminal lawyer Thomas, for whom Palipodin worked as a clerk. Thomas explains that Palipodin was involved in all his cases and had many enemies. He offers to provide a list of his clients if needed. Thomas reveals that Palipodin had been his clerk since his father's time and had mastered everything from IPC sections to court procedures. Palipodin knows exactly how to commit a crime and escape from it. In the following scene, the Aussie meets Palipodin's friend, Michael, to gather information about Palipodin's dealings. However, Michael supports Palipodin and tells the Aussie that if Palipodin has decided to kill someone, that person is definitely doomed. Michael warns the Aussie that trying to catch Palipodin is futile and suggests finding out who the dead person is. Michael adds that if the Aussie continues, his own story might end alongside Palipodin's. Meanwhile, the entire town is discussing how the police are targeting Palipodin. In the next scene, the Aussie prepares a list and shows it to the inspector. According to the Aussie, all 9 individuals on the list have had issues with Palipodin, so he guesses that Palipodin might have killed one of them. The police start tracing these individuals, removing the names of those who are still alive from the list. Only 2 names remain: Tanker Shaiju and Peter. Tanker Shaiju was imprisoned for smuggling liquor, and Palipodin was responsible for his jail sentence. After Shaiju's release, he went to Palipodin's house to threaten him. Shaiju's wife mentions that he left for Polachi with a load but hasn't returned. The other person on the list is Palipodin's relative, Peter. In an earlier scene, Palipodin slapped Peter on the road. That night, Peter went missing. Peter's father last saw him leaving to meet Palipodin. Both Shaiju and Peter are now missing, and their phones are switched off. The Aussie shares these details with the inspector. The following night, as it rains, a villager stealthily sneaks into Palipodin's house. He still suspects Palipodin and checks each room with a torchlight for any evidence. As Palipodin wakes up and starts moving, the villager hides and escapes from the house. However, Palipodin spots him through the window. The villager runs to a police jeep parked at a distance and gets in, revealing that the Aussie had sent him to Palipodin's house. The villager reports that he didn't find anyone new in the house. Meanwhile, Palipodin finds a photo stuck to a cupboard in his house, showing his son. At this point, a flashback about Palipodin's son begins. The boy's name is Ibi, and he can only walk with difficulty. Ibi dreams of becoming a music director, so he is always composing music and singing. He has a group of friends, and one of them is good at playing the keyboard. Ibi and his friend work together, showing their compositions to producers and directors in hopes of getting a chance in cinema. Everyone in the area knows about Ibi's good nature and talent. One day, Ibi and his friends are enjoying music and dancing at home when Palipodin comes and scolds them. Music is Ibi's world, but his father doesn't understand it, which makes Ibi feel bad. Ibi and his friend meet with a producer and a director. The director describes a scene where a father kills his son and buries him in the backyard, with an evil expression on his face, and asks Ibi to create a thrilling background score. Ibi tries his best to impress them. A week later, Ibi returns home to find Tanker Shaiju arguing with Palipodin. Inside, Ibi discovers a new door in his room, which leads to a recording room with music instruments, a mic, and speakers. Palipodin has created this soundproof room to support Ibi's interest in music, ensuring that the sound does not disturb him. Ibi realizes that his father loves him but doesn't show it outwardly. Overjoyed, Ibi creates an impressive background score and shows it to the producer and director, who are impressed and give Ibi and his friend a chance to work as music directors in the film. Ibi brings the advance payment from the producer to Palipodin, who tells him to keep it. Ibi feels upset, but Palipodin explains to his wife that he wanted their son to spend the money he earned with his talent. Hearing this, Ibi feels happy. Ibi's music talent impresses the producer, who introduces Ibi to VIPs at a party. After the party, Ibi and his friend leave on a bike when a tempo hits them from behind. Both Ibi and his friend are thrown off the bike. Ibi hits a tree, and they both lose consciousness. The tempo driver sees this but doesn't stop to help and drives away. A short distance later, the police stop the tempo at a checkpost and find that the driver is drunk using a breath analyzer. They notice a broken headlight and question the driver, who admits to causing an accident. The police go to the accident spot and take the unconscious Ibi and his friend to the hospital. Unfortunately, Ibi passes away, and his friend is in serious condition in the ICU. Ibi's death shocks his family, friends, and the local community. After Ebby's funeral, Palipodin goes to the room he had prepared for Ebby. The room is filled with Ebby's memories and dreams, which Palipodin finds unbearable. He decides to hide the room behind a cupboard. Palipodin looks at Ebby's post-mortem report, which indicates that the cause of death was a severe head injury. Palipodin discusses this with a doctor, who suggests that Ebby's head might have been forcefully hit by the tempo. Ebby's friend recovers and Palipodin visits him to ask about the accident. The friend recounts that they lost consciousness after being hit by the tempo, and Ebby briefly regained consciousness before passing away. Palipodin shows the friend a photo of the tempo driver, but the friend doesn't remember the driver's face. It is only after seeing the driver's photo in the newspaper that the friend identifies him. Palipodin starts collecting details related to the case, speaking to the police and the tempo driver. The driver admits to causing the accident due to being drunk and explains the timeline of events. Palipodin visits the accident spot and notices 2 cameras that might have recorded the incident. Checking the footage, he finds new information. A truck crossed the same route shortly after the tempo. The truck was driven by tanker Shiju. Palipodin meets Thomas and reveals that Ebby's death was not an accident but a murder. Thomas suggests informing the police to seek justice, but Palipodin knows that such a case could drag on for years. Palipodin decides to take matters into his own hands and avenge his son's death. The flashback ends, and the scene returns to the present. Peter, who was being searched by the police, arrives at the police station. Peter had gone to Bangalore to stay with friends due to financial troubles and fear of a financier. Before leaving, he had told his father he was going to meet Palipodin. The police realize that Palipodin had nothing to do with Peter's disappearance. Since Peter is safe, the inspector suspects that tanker Shiju might be the victim. To arrest Palipodin, they need evidence of Shiju visiting Palipodin's house. The Aussie asks the servant lady for help and tells her that the blood on Palipodin's shirt was Shiju's, not chicken blood. The servant lady is confused about whether to trust the police or Palipodin. The next day, the servant lady checks Palipodin's house for evidence. She tries to move the cupboard in Ebby's room, suspecting something behind it. At that moment, her husband calls and informs her that tanker Shiju is still alive. The scene cuts to tanker Shiju at the police station. He had been maintaining another family without his wife's knowledge and had turned off his phone to avoid her. The police realize that Palipodin has no connection to Shiju's disappearance, and there is no victim from the ASI's list. The police are puzzled about their mistake. Meanwhile, Palipodin opens the secret room in his house, where someone is tied to a chair. It is none other than Ebby's friend. The flashback continues. On the day of the accident, Ebby and his friend were both unconscious. After a while, Ebby regained consciousness and woke up his friend. Ebby was happy that his friend was unharmed, but his friend harbored jealousy towards Ebby. Despite working together on music, all the praise and opportunities were given only to Ebby. The producer offered the cinema opportunity solely because of Ebby's music, without acknowledging his friend's contribution. This made the friend feel insulted, and he developed an intense desire for recognition. Seizing the opportunity presented by the accident, the friend struck Ebby's head with an iron rod that had fallen from the bike. When the police arrived at the scene, the friend pretended to be unconscious, having thrown away the rod. Ebby's post-mortem report suggested suspicions of foul play to Palipodin because the timing of the accident and the head injury didn't match. Driven by his suspicions, Palipodin started investigating. During the investigation, he learned that Ebby had briefly regained consciousness and mentioned the friend, leading Palipodin to suspect the friend again. To obtain a confession, Palipodin set a trap by installing a jammer at home and placing a GPS tracker in the friend's car. After sending his wife to Madurai, Palipodin used an app to stop the friend's car and offered him a lift back to the house through a discreet route. Inside the house, Palipodin confronted the friend, who eventually confessed. In a struggle, the friend attempted to kill Palipodin but was overpowered. The damage to the house, including the broken TV, happened during this altercation, and the bloodstains on Palipodin's shirt came from the friend's hand. Palipodin tied the friend up in the secret room, a location unknown to anyone and soundproofed. This is why the police couldn't find anything during their search. The next day, Palipodin played Ebby's last composed background music on the laptop in the secret room. He then used the same iron rod to kill the friend, avenging his son's death. It is not shown what Palipodin did with the body, but he knew how to dispose of it without getting caught. The police remain vigilant, waiting for a mistake that will expose Palipodin. In the climax, a wealthy man named Hari arrives at the police station, having traveled from Bangalore. He files a missing person report for his brother, who had been missing for several days. The missing brother is none other than Ebby's friend. Meanwhile, the neighbor's dog, Jimmy, returns home, confusing the servant lady. She wonders what Palipodin buried in the backyard, but then sees a plant growing there and feels relieved, thinking it was only a seed. The scene cuts to Palipodin enjoying Ebby's music through headphones. The movie ends on this note.